For 6 weeks, I cleaned the floors of my own company and nobody knew who I was. Every morning, I walked those hallways with a mop in my hand while the manager laughed at me right in front of his staff. He called me the old janitor, said I was slow, said I was invisible, and every single person around him believed him. What they didn't know was that I owned the entire company. Every office, every paycheck, even the chair he sat in every morning acting like he ran the place. But I wasn't there to play dress up. I went undercover for a reason. Because rumors about that office kept reaching me and I wanted to see the truth with my own eyes. What I found was worse than I expected. Then one Tuesday morning, everything changed. I walked into the building wearing a $4,000 suit instead of that gray uniform, and the same manager who ignored me for 6 straight weeks suddenly stood up to shake my hand. He didn't recognize me. Not until I sat across from him, dropped a folder on his desk, and told him 3 words that turned his face completely white. "You're fired, Kevin." And trust me, what happened next shocked everyone in that building. Welcome to Proven Right Stories. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now. Because on this channel, the people everyone overlooks always get the last word. Every single time. Now before we get into today's story, get comfortable. Grab your coffee. Grab a snack. Because this is one of those stories that keeps changing the second you think you've figured it out. And trust me, the payoff is worth the wait. Let's get into it. My name is Martin Calloway. I'm 62 years old. And before I tell you what happened in that office that morning, there's something you need to understand about me first. I've been underestimated my entire life. Not in some dramatic movie-type way where somebody points at you and laughs in front of a crowd. No, real life usually isn't that loud. Most of the time, people underestimate you quietly. They look at you for maybe 4 or 5 seconds, make a decision in their head, and suddenly they think they know exactly who you are, how smart you are, how important you are, how much respect you deserve. And once people make that decision, most of them never bother questioning it again. I learned that lesson early. I grew up in a small town in western Pennsylvania. My father worked in a steel plant for 34 years. Hard man, worked long hours, came home exhausted almost every night. My mother cleaned houses twice a week just to help keep the bills paid. Now, we weren't poor in the way people usually imagine poor. We always had food on the table. The lights stayed on. But we definitely weren't comfortable either. Across town, there were families with big 2-story homes, clean driveways, and garages with 2 cars sitting inside. We lived on the other side of town. And honestly, I'm glad we did. Because growing up that way taught me something most people never learn. It taught me how to watch people. Not react. Not argue. Not announce myself. Just watch. And over time, that became the most valuable skill I ever had. I learned how to sit quietly in a room and pay attention to what people did when they thought nobody important was watching. What they said when they believed no one was really listening. How they treated the people they considered beneath them. And what those little moments revealed about who they actually were. Because the truth is, most people are careless about who they think matters. And that lesson is the entire reason this story happened. I started my first company in 1991. I was 28 years old. Had a business degree from a small state university that most of the big firms in the city wouldn't have taken seriously. And the loan I used to start the company? My mother had to co-sign for it because I didn't even have enough credit history to qualify on my own. That's how small this thing started. The company was called Calloway Facility Services. Commercial cleaning, building maintenance, janitorial staffing. Not exactly glamorous work. Definitely not the kind of business people get excited about at dinner parties. The second people heard the word janitorial, I'd see it happen. Their eyes would shift just a little. Their interest would disappear just a little faster. Then came the polite nod, the fake smile, and usually a quick attempt to change the subject. But honestly, I never minded that reaction. Because those tiny reactions told me everything I needed to know about a person. For the first 10 years, I did almost everything myself. I cleaned buildings. I hired staff. I negotiated contracts early in the morning and mopped floors late at night when a client had an emergency and nobody else was available. There were nights I left one building at midnight and showed up at another before sunrise. I knew every supply closet in every property we managed. I knew which floor chemicals could never be mixed together. I knew how to strip and wax commercial tile correctly. I knew which clients respected workers and which ones treated them like furniture. I knew the business from the ground up because I lived inside it. And slowly, the company started growing. By 2005, Calloway Facility Services had 43 employees and contracts with 11 commercial properties across Pennsylvania and Ohio. By 2012, we had more than 200 employees and 38 major client accounts. and the bigger the company became. The more invisible I learned people like us were to the corporate world. By the time I turned 60, I had built something nobody from my side of town was ever expected to build. Certainly not a steelworker's son. Certainly not the kid whose mother spent her mornings cleaning other people's houses. But life has a funny way of surprising people who make assumptions too quickly. And that brings me to Derek Poole. Derek was 38. Sharp haircut. Perfect smile. MBA from one of those universities people love mentioning in conversations without technically bragging about it. You know the type. He had mastered that polished corporate style where every sentence sounded rehearsed just enough to impress people. He drove a luxury car that cost a little more than necessary. Wore suits just a little too expensive for the position he had. Everything about him felt carefully calculated. 18 months before all this happened, Derek was hired as regional operations manager for our Pittsburgh division. Technically, I wasn't the one who hired him. My VP of operations, Ellen Marsh, handled it. And Ellen was one of the smartest people I'd ever worked with. I trusted her completely. According to everyone involved in the interview process, Derek had been exceptional. Strong resume, confident speaker, professional, organized, the kind of candidate companies fight over. And honestly, at first, the reports looked great. Derek hit his numbers, kept meetings tight, spoke well with clients. Productivity looked solid on paper. But then, small things started changing. Nothing dramatic at first, just little cracks. Staff complaints started appearing more often than usual. Turnover numbers in Pittsburgh kept climbing higher than every other region we had. Client satisfaction scores slowly started slipping in the wrong direction. And then the phone calls started coming in. Not angry calls. Those would have been easier. These were the careful corporate kind. The kind where people lower their voice slightly and say they're concerned. And in business, when someone says they're concerned, what they usually mean is, something is wrong and they're trying not to make it official yet. Within 6 weeks, 3 different client contacts reached out directly to Ellen. Not to file complaints. Not yet. But they all hinted at the same thing. One mentioned management culture in the Pittsburgh division. Another said the cleaning crews looked exhausted, understaffed, and completely demoralized. A third client said he'd already brought problems to Derek personally, and Derek assured him everything was being handled. But nothing changed. That was the moment I started paying attention. Ellen brought it to me in October. She didn't soften it. She didn't try to dress it up. She just laid everything on the table and let me read it for myself. And I did. Every report, every complaint, every client note, every pattern she had quietly been tracking. When I finished, I surprised her. I told her I wanted to handle it myself. Not through a memo, not through an audit, not through layers of management. Personally, and quietly. Now, when I say quietly, I mean something very specific. I didn't call Derek. I didn't send an inspection team. I didn't announce an internal review. I didn't put a single person on alert. I went in blind. And I went in from the bottom. I put on a gray uniform. Simple, unremarkable, the kind nobody looks twice at. I clicked on a badge, a real one, issued through our own HR system. A placeholder identity we had never assigned to an actual employee yet. The name on it was M. Cole. And on a Monday morning in October, I walked into the Pittsburgh regional office as a new janitor. No announcement, no introduction, no special treatment. The office manager was a woman named Carolyn. 3 years in the Pittsburgh division. Efficient, professional, the kind of person who keeps things moving without asking questions she doesn't think she needs answered. She barely looked up when she processed my paperwork. Just typed, stamped, signed off. Then she handed me a supply card and pointed toward the hallway. "Second floor needs attention first," she said, already turning back to her screen. I nodded. "Got it," I said. And I pushed that card down the hallway like I had done it my entire life. That I want to be very specific about what I saw over the next 6 weeks. Because specifics matter when you're building a case. And from the very first morning, I was building a case. The first thing that stood out to me was the staff. Our cleaning crews are the backbone of everything we do. They are the reason clients stay or leave. They are the reason contracts get renewed or canceled. And the crews in the Pittsburgh division were clearly not okay. But it wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. The kind of quiet where people still show up to work, still do their jobs, but something inside them has already checked out. Heads down, eyes avoiding management. No conversations in the break room beyond what was absolutely necessary. No laughter, no energy, just work. And I've seen this before. I've seen it in places where leadership slowly teaches people that they don't matter, that they're replaceable, that speaking up only makes things worse. That kind of culture doesn't break people all at once. It drains them slowly. Over the next 3 weeks, I started talking to people. Quietly. Naturally. The kind of conversations that happen when you're just the janitor in the room, wiping tables while someone eats lunch, and neither of you feels like the other has authority over anything in that moment. No pressure. No titles. Just honesty. And what I heard started forming a pattern. Derek Poole was regularly taking credit for ideas that came directly from floor staff and presenting them to clients as his own initiatives. 2 separate scheduling complaints had been ignored for months, not because they were complicated, but because they were inconvenient, and fixing them would have required effort he didn't want to put in. One of those issues, based on what I later confirmed through supply and work records, could have been resolved in less than half a day of administrative coordination. It had been sitting there for 6 months. Then there was Ronald Bridges, 27 years in facility services, one of the most experienced floor supervisors we had in any region. A man who understood the work better than most managers ever would. Derek had dismissed him as old school and told him his methods were not aligned with the direction the company was moving. In other words, experience had become a problem. And then I looked at the overtime records. That's where things stopped being just concerning and started becoming serious. I pulled the time data myself. Full system access. Direct records. And what I found was simple and clean in the worst way. Overtime hours were being systematically underreported for the Pittsburgh crews. Not enough to trigger immediate alarms on a single employee, but enough across the entire division to add up to something significant. The work was being done. The hours were being worked. But the payroll records didn't match reality, which meant the money was going somewhere else. That Thursday evening, after my 4th week in the building, I sat in my car and made a call to my attorney. I told him to start pulling the financial records for the Pittsburgh division. Then I paused for a moment, and I told him what I was planning to do next week that I want to tell you about the Tuesday morning in November, because this is the part of the story most people struggle to believe. Not because it didn't happen, but because they can't picture themselves in that room when it did. That morning started like every other morning. I arrived at the Pittsburgh office on time. Gray uniform, badge clipped, supply card in front of me. Nothing unusual to anyone watching. I worked the building like I always did. 3rd floor first, then the executive break room, then the 2nd floor men's room. Soap, paper towels, the usual checks. No one paid attention. That was the point. At around 10:15, I went down to the 1st floor supply closet. Inside, tucked behind extra cleaning supplies, was a garment bag I had placed there the previous Friday. I changed there, quietly. No rush, no drama. Just a simple shift from something invisible to something undeniable. Gray uniform off, suit on. And then I walked upstairs, straight to Derek Poole's office. His assistant was at the front desk. A young woman named Priya. Focused, efficient, the kind of employee who tries to keep everything moving smoothly, no matter what's happening around her. She looked up when I approached. I gave her my name, my real name. She paused, just for a second, then checked the guest log, then looked back at me again. "I'm sorry," she said carefully. "Could you repeat that?" I did. This time, she didn't ask again. Her expression changed immediately, subtle, but sharp enough to notice. She picked up the phone and informed Derek he had a visitor. A few seconds passed. Then she nodded. "You can go in." I walked into the office. Derek Poole was behind his desk exactly as I expected him to be. Sharp suit, coffee on the side, laptop open with a presentation on the screen. The posture of someone who is prepared for a normal, controlled meeting. He looked up and didn't recognize me. I took a seat without asking. That was the first moment the rhythm of his day broke. He leaned slightly forward, polite, but confused. "I'm sorry," he said. "I don't think we've scheduled a..." "We haven't," I said, and I placed a folder on his desk. No hesitation, no build-up, just the truth sitting between us in paper form. Inside that folder was everything. Overtime discrepancies my attorney had documented, client satisfaction records, staff complaint logs, and recorded conversations, legally obtained under Pennsylvania law, where Derek had directly addressed cleaning crews and said things that could not be ignored once written down and verified. For the first time, Derek's eyes stopped moving like a confident manager's. He looked at the folder, then at me, and something in his expression shifted, not recognition exactly, more like the start of a question he didn't want to finish asking out loud. I didn't wait for him to recover. I looked at him and said, calm and steady, "I've been working in this building for 6 weeks. I want you to understand that." Silence. No interruption. No reaction. Just the weight of it settling into the room. Then I continued. "My name is Martin Calloway. I founded this company in 1991. I own it. That was the moment it fully hit him. I saw it happen in real time. The color drained from his face. Not suddenly, but in stages. Like his brain was trying to reject the information and then slowly failing. I watched the calculation start behind his eyes. The realization. The rewind. The memory of every hallway moment. Every time he walked past me. Every time he didn't look up. Every time he dismissed me as nothing more than a janitor. Every time he said things in front of other people assuming I didn't matter enough to register them. And now all of it was coming back at once. He opened his mouth, started to speak. I raised my hand. Just once. Not angry, not emotional, just final. I want to be very clear, I said. This is not a disciplinary hearing. I paused. The disciplinary hearing will be scheduled through HR with legal counsel present. That will happen this week. Then I stood up. This meeting, I continued, is a courtesy. I wanted you to hear it from me directly before you hear it through the formal process. I picked up the folder from his desk, turned toward the door, and then I stopped. One more thing. He looked at me again, and for the first time, there was no confidence left in his expression, only uncertainty. Ronald Bridges, I said. I let the name sit there. The supervisor you told had outdated methods. A pause. He's been with this company since 1999. He has the highest client retention rate in our entire operation. Another pause. I'm moving him into your office. I turned, and I left. What happened after that was simple and very controlled. Derek Poole's employment was terminated 4 days later, after the formal HR process was completed. The investigation into the overtime records confirmed what I already suspected. There were serious discrepancies, misappropriation of funds, systemic underreporting of hours, and enough evidence to escalate the case into a criminal matter. I won't go into the exact figures here, because legal proceedings are still ongoing, but I will say this clearly. What was uncovered was not small. It was structural and intentional. Ronald Bridges, on the other hand, was promoted. He became the regional manager for the Pittsburgh division, and the difference was almost immediate. Within 1 quarter, client satisfaction went up by 11 points. Staff turnover dropped by 40%. Not because of some new system, not because of new policies, but because people finally felt like someone was actually listening to them. After everything settled, Ellen Marsh told me something I won't forget. She said in 30 years of working with me, she had never seen me handle a situation like that. I told her the truth. I had learned it in the early years of the company, back when I was the one pushing the cart, cleaning the floors, and listening more than I spoke. Because here's the lesson. It's simple. The people doing the actual work, the floor-level workers, the ones nobody notices, the ones nobody thinks to ask, those are the people who know what is really happening inside a company. They see everything. They hear everything. They remember everything. And the moment leadership starts treating them like they don't matter, that's the moment leadership stops seeing reality. Derek Poole treated the cleaning crew like furniture. He didn't notice when one of them was watching very closely. I am still the CEO of Calloway Facility Services. I still know how to mop a floor. And yes, I still do it sometimes. Not undercover anymore. Not like before. Just to stay connected to where this company actually comes from. And to remind myself, anyone really, that the person pushing a cart down a hallway might understand a business better than the person sitting in the corner office. You just have to be paying attention. Now I want to ask you something directly. If you were in Derek's position, after spending 18 months treating the cleaning crew like they were invisible, and then found out one of them actually owned the building, what would you have said in that room? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to know. And if you know someone like Derek, someone who overlooks the people doing the real work, send them this story. Not to shame them, just to remind them of something important. The person they're not paying attention to might be the most important one in the room. I'll see you on the next one.